So we'll get started. Got it. Okay. Welcome everybody to Washtenaw Audubon Society February program. Our speaker today is Mike Kielb. Many of you know Mike Kielb if you've been around in birding circles or natural circles. I'm sure you've heard of Mike Kielb, so we're really happy to have him here today. He's going to talk about the natural history of Michigan through the seasons, which I'm really excited about. I love hearing about the birds, but if you throw in other things, it's even better. So I'm really excited to hear this talk. For those of you that don't know Michael, Michael's a retired university biology teacher. He's a popular field trip leader and speaker on natural history. He and wife Susan divide their time between Ann Arbor and Whitefish Point. Mike is a past board member of Michigan Audubon, Whitefish Point Bird Observatory, Holiday Beach Migration Association, and most importantly, past president of Washtenaw Audubon Society. So it's nice to have Mike. Mike's also an author. He's one of the authors, along with John Swales and Richard Walensky, with Birds of Washtenaw County, which I encourage you. It was published back in the late 90s, but it's really fun to go through that book. And they have it at the library. Of course, you should buy it if you can. You still getting money off that, Mike? Getting rich off it. But it's a great book. I encourage you to check it out. He's also was one of the co-authors, contributing authors to Birds of Michigan, and he did the raptor section in that book. So I'd like to welcome Mike to the podium. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Am I in a good spot here? Okay. All right. We're going to talk about the natural history of Michigan through the year. You notice it's kind of a funky little 2 that's on the screen. It's all the spots that I'll be kind of hitting, and you know, we'll visit a lot of places, talk about a lot of birds, plants, animals, and so places to go. In the Upper Peninsula, there's a wide variety of places that you can visit any time in the year. Pashiki Grade, which is west of Marquette, has nesting gray jay, blackback woodpecker, boreal chickadee. It has interesting plants, and it's just it's a nice place to go in the summertime. Pictured Rocks, besides having a tremendous variety of nesting birds, is great for orchids, moonworts, which are funky little ferns. A lot of interesting plants, so it's also worth visiting in the summer. Whitefish Point, we go there we've been there every month of the year, so it's a good spot to go and just see birds. Curly Lewis and Naomi Kong, which is along the southern edge of Whitefish Bay, has a tremendous number of nesting warblers. We've censused that road for about 10 years now, and we typically get 18 to 20 nesting species. And besides the fact, the Naomi Kong is a great place for orchids. Sault Ste. Marie, Rudyard Pickford area in the winter, good for owls and other winter birds. In mid-Michigan, you can go to Mayo. Everybody goes there for one thing, basically, Kirlins Warbler. But as well as Kirlins Warbler, there are upland sandpipers, brewer's blackbirds, and clay-colored sparrows. In the western UP, you can go to the Muskegon water treatment plant for shorebirds. Allegan County, which has the only nesting worm-eating warblers in Michigan, besides a whole bunch of other nice birds. Bishop's Bog near Kalamazoo has a lot of interesting bog plants and insects, and I'll show you a really neat orchid that you can find there. In southeastern Michigan, Erie Metro Park for fall hawk migration, Point Mouillet for waterfall shorebirds, and you can also see a hawk migration there. Washtenaw County, where most people are from, you've got Nichols Arboretum, Furstenberg, Dolph. Van Weston, where we were yesterday, for neat plants. The Eddy Nature Preserve, has a bog with a lot of interesting orchids and carnivorous plants. Sharon State Game Area has nesting field birds. Park Linden, Embry Road, which I think sometimes gets underbirded these days, has a lot of neat birds during migration, but also has interesting birds in the summer. You've got a lot of cerulean warblers there, both cuckoos, broadwing hawk, just nice birds. So let's start at Rudyard. I like the fact that Rudyard has now, along the 3 main roads entering town, signs that say, "Welcome to Rudyard, snowy owl capital." Well, it is. We've seen up to 20 snowy owls just on 4 roads around Rudyard. And, you know, the fact that you can be on I-75 at the exit for Pickford and Rudyard and have a snowy owl perched on that sign, I think is really good. So, and I know yesterday or the day before, a friend of ours had 15 snowy owls at Rudyard. And it's best to be there at sunup. And in the last couple of times he's gone there, he's taken photos with 3 and 4 snowy owls in the photo. When you're in the north, you see a lot of corvids. On the left here is a crow, but on the right is a raven. Ravens used to nest as far south in Michigan as Washtenaw County, and they're slowly expanding into southern Michigan again. They disappeared with logging. Once you got rid of all the woodlands, large woodlands in southern Michigan, they were gone, and they were in the north. But once you get southern Ohio heading south through Appalachia, you have ravens again. So it's basically logging. They got rid of everything. So when you're up north looking for snowy owls, ravens, you're going to find other owls. Like maybe you'll find a hawk owl. Hawk owls are you know, they're pretty cool birds. Every couple years there's one or more. We haven't had a real invasion of hawk owls in quite a while, but Susan and I one year had 7 in a day, so it can be pretty amazing. And saw-whet owls. Saw-whet owls, you find where they are. They're here. They're in the UP all year, and they should be calling pretty soon. Nesting season for them will start shortly. Long-eared and short-eared owls also occur all through Michigan, but it's easiest to see short-eared owls in southern Michigan. Right now, I'm watching people post photos of short-eared owls all over southern Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin. So the light-colored bird in the upper center is a short-eared owl. The bird perched in a tree is a long-eared owl. Whitefish Point has a tremendous migration of long-eared owls in the spring. And that one was photographed in the spring. On the darker birds flying are long-eared owls in migration. I took that picture at 10 o'clock at night, and I really kind of forced my camera to do it. The other 3 common owls you'll find all through Michigan. Great horned owls, that's a great horned owlet on a nest at the left. Screech owl in the middle, which you will not find in the Upper Peninsula, only the western Upper Peninsula close to Wisconsin. They're starting to enter the UP from Wisconsin. And then barred owls. The owl everyone wants to find is a great gray owl. This is a great gray owl in April in the Upper Peninsula. I think it was 1994 that we had a major invasion of great gray owls. And imagine going to one spot, the Sugar Island, and seeing 65 great gray owls, or you could look out over a field and you would see 15 or 20 of them, all perched on little conifers, spruce trees, jack pines, 8-10 feet up, looking for something to eat. It was about 5 or 6 years ago that they had a great gray owl in Essex, Ontario, which is technically just a little bit south of Ann Arbor. So these birds do show up in weird places. Bald eagles have become quite common in Michigan. 40 years ago, when you knew about a bald eagle nest, you were told to keep it quiet. I can remember when the first nesting happened in the southern part of the state. There was a nest at near Point Mouillet. And now they're nesting in almost every county. So that's just an eagle nest. At the top, you've got a 2nd to 3rd year bald eagle. And at the bottom, you have an adult bald eagle. But with bald eagles, which are common migrants, fairly common nesting birds, you also want to see the other eagle, golden eagles. I tell people, if you want to see the 2 birds on the left of the screen are golden eagles. If you want to see golden eagles, I'm sorry, I know that they come through at Lake Erie, but you never get great looks at them. You want to see golden eagles like those views, you go to Whitefish Point in April and May. This other bird, which looks so much larger than a gold eagle, but it isn't, is a northern goshawk juvenile. And once again, a lot of these raptor pictures I took at Whitefish Point. Our common buteos, red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, are you can see them almost anywhere. The red-tailed hawk in the upper left is a typical bird. Below it, believe it or not, those are 2 red-tailed hawks soaring together. One of them is a dark morph, one of them is a light morph. And then in the center is a red-shouldered hawk, and on the upper right, you've got a migrating or a soaring juvenile red-shouldered hawk. You can tell by those white crescents near the tips of the wings. In the late 1940s, most people are surprised, but in Washtenaw County, red-shouldered hawk was the common nesting bird. And red-tailed hawks were quite rare. But once they cleared out the woods for farming, red-tailed hawks totally replaced red shoulders. Another bird people really want to see are rough-legged hawks. And rough-legs come in all different color variations. And it's got to do with a couple of things. Differences between males and females. So on the left of the screen, you've got an adult male. On the lower right, you've got an adult female. Above it, the female, you've got a dark juvenile bird. So, you're going to look at when you see a lot of roughlegs migrating, you're going to find a lot of variations in the birds. Another hawk that everybody really wants, Swainson's hawk. You can get Swainson's hawk at Erie Metro Park or at Point Mouillet in the fall. You'll never have really great looks, but at Whitefish Point, once again in the spring, you're going to have fantastic looks. Typically in the spring, we'll have 5 or 6 days with a Swainson's hawk, and you have to be there on those days because you never know if they're going to stick around or be gone. We also have quite a variety of falcons in Michigan. Peregrines on the left there are being seen everywhere. They started nesting in the state about 25 years ago and have just taken off. In the middle, you've got merlins, which are also quite common, but people mistake them frequently for kestrels. And then, of course, you have a kestrel. The bird that's out of focus up there was a gyrfalcon that surprised me. I had been watching a gyrfalcon. It was perched on a building in the Sault Ste. Marie, and I was focusing on it over there, taking pictures. And the next thing I know, I couldn't see it, and it had come, and it was literally 40 feet over my head, and I just couldn't react fast enough. I think it came to check me out. Sharp-shinned hawk on the left, perched in a tree, and a Cooper's hawk soaring on the right. You'll see both of those almost anywhere in Michigan. I really like harriers. Harriers to me are just one of the neatest birds. Once again, you can tell the males and females and juveniles from each other pretty easily. The males are white and gray and black. So the bird on the right is a male. The bird on the lower left is a female. Now, a lot of people have trouble differentiating a female and a juvenile bird, but you can do it because the wing lining on the female is much darker below the covert feathers. So you can tell them apart. Ospreys, we see them everywhere. They're nesting in most counties now, and they're just, a pretty neat bird. Of course, broadwing hawks. You see one here, you have a nesting pair there. What you really want to see is the sky littered with them. And that's what that is. It's a big group of broadwings. It's a big kettle of broadwings. I've kind of chased broadwings all over North America, from Whitefish Point to Cape May, down into Texas, and into Veracruz in Mexico. And the best day I've ever had is just under 500,000 broadwings. So they can be really fun. So besides raptors, when you're up north, there are other birds like Bohemian waxwings. I think anybody who's gone up north this year probably has seen Bohemian waxwings. And red poles. Red poles are a lot tougher this year. We had one flock of red poles when we were up, and that was it. Normally, red poles are at our feeder, and just they're the most common bird we have. And of course, boreal chickadees. Boreal chickadees nest in the UP, and there are years when they're more common, years when they're less common. Right now, between Paradise and Whitefish Point, there are boreal chickadees. The other bird everyone wants to see in the winter is gray jay. Well, yeah, you can see them in the winter, but go to Pashiki Grade in the summer and you'll have them eaten out of your hands, literally. That's what Susan and I did one year. We went to Pashiki, and we're sitting down, and they weren't doing anything. We could hear them, we could see them, but we wanted them eating out of our hands. So I'm going, okay, it's time for me to eat lunch. And so I'm eating lunch, and I had a sandwich in my hand, and a bird just comes right into my hand and goes after the sandwich. So yeah. So you can see gray jays. Hulbert Bog in the UP is one spot, but you can see them. There are a lot of other winter birds that also, some of them hang around. Evening grosbeaks. Evening grosbeaks nest in the UP, and they tend to be more common in the winter and during migration. And then you have pine grosbeaks. So the bird on the left is an evening grosbeak. Bird on the right is a female pine grosbeak. Here's a male pine grosbeak with a common red poll. Up in the upper right corner is a hoary red bull. Typically, if you have any flock of 300 or 400 red polls, you have a good chance of finding a hoary. There was a year we had, I think, about 300 at our bird feeders at Whitefish Point, and we had up to 6 or 7 a day. I had so many people coming to visit us that wanted to just see a hoary red bull. So you have a lot of different field birds. Red polls are really field birds. It's not uncommon to see them in weedy fields. Field birds have become a little bit of a problem in Michigan. You have Lapland longspurs. Those happen to be breeding plumage Lapland longspurs. That's a spring thing. And eastern meadowlarks. Those are both good birds to find in field areas. Longspurs you'll also find in sandy shores. So about this time now, we're into spring migration. And I start thinking about, let's go out and look at plants. And that's what we were doing yesterday. We were out looking at plants. So one of the first flowering plants that occurs in southern Michigan is the harbinger of spring. That's the one on the left. The one on the right here is Dutchman's breeches. Those to me are two real spring ephemerals. You see them in late April and early May. Just like the trout lilies. You've got the yellow and the white. The white's a little harder to find. Furstenberg in Ann Arbor has a big population of white trout lilies. That and Mary Beth Doyle also does. A plant I always wanted to see, a flower, was miterwort or bishop's cap. And in the center, you can see the flower. It's a big, stunning flower. Okay. Big? That's just what somebody said. No, you look at it in a field guide, it's a big, stunning flower. That flower is about 4 millimeters across. I had been looking for years for something that didn't exist. And I realized I've been walking past thousands of them. You got to get down on your knees to look at them. On the right here, we've got squirrel corn. Anywhere you have Dutchman's breeches, you're also likely to find squirrel corn. So when you have all these plants, to me, all of a sudden I start thinking, well, insects. Well, there'll be insects. Moths and butterflies, for example. On the left there, you've got Ailanthus webworm. Ailanthus is the tree of heaven. It's not native. It's kind of a pesty tree, but the webworm eats it. So, besides being a really pretty moth, as far as it does a good job. We've got a lot of butterflies. These 3 butterflies here are all from the Upper Peninsula. You've got brown elfin, which occurs in as far south as Washtenaw County in small numbers. In the upper corner, you've got what look like eastern swallowtails, eastern tiger swallowtail, but they're not. They're Canada swallowtails. These occur in the Upper Peninsula, and they are slightly different from the eastern tiger swallowtail. Those happen to be on some animal droppings in the middle of a road. And then below that is a hoary elfin, which is another small butterfly. Now at our cabin at Whitefish Point, we set up lights for moths every night from late March till early November. And we get quite a variety of moths. So on the left up there, you've got a Luna moth, and in the middle is a Columbia, and just below it is a Cecropia. Those are all, we literally have to just open our door to get onto our deck to see them. And to give you an idea for really how big they are, there's a Luna moth on my hand, and here's a Cecropia and a Columbia moth on hand. Now, believe it or not, those are huge. There's one moth that's bigger and doesn't belong here. This is a black witch. It was hit by a car at Whitefish Point. It was the 2nd record for Whitefish Point. And these don't breed in the United States. They breed in Mexico, Central America, and South America. They wander north some years in small numbers, and they can occur anywhere. I've seen them in Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama. I like big insects. Big insects really kind of float my boat. We have 3 mantises in Michigan. Carolina mantis, which is quite rare. European mantis and the Chinese mantis are both non-native. They've been introduced to control pests. These are Chinese mantises that I annoyed. And it's a female. They're big. They're the biggest of the mantises we have in the United States. And just to show you how annoyed she was with me, I had set her down, and she kind of reared up and you know, kind of put, I think the best thing to have done would have been have a little video of her. So as I said earlier, field birds can be a problem. Well, here are 3 examples that are, only one of them is a field bird, but they're sparrows. The problem with field birds is that we're losing fields, the habitat loss. The problem we have, and I'm gonna show you another bird that's that's disappearing, and another one that's kind of adapting. But at the top center, you've got a field sparrow. Those are still doing okay, but not as large in numbers as we had in the past. At the lower left, you've got Lincoln sparrow. Lincoln sparrow is really a boreal bird. Most people think, oh, they're really rare. I only see one every other year in migration. Well, maybe, but go to a boreal bog. We'll go to a bog, and in the morning as the sun is rising, all you can hear, Lincoln sparrow songs. They are common. The other bird, on the other hand, is a true vagrant. That's a golden crown sparrow. That's a West Coast species that showed up at the feeder at Whitefish Point. Bobolinks are one of those field birds that there's a problem. We had a friend who studied bobolinks, and so for 3 years followed bobolinks she had banded, and in the 3 years, every nest in Michigan failed. That's because farmers are cutting their hay fields a month earlier than they used to. And when they cut the field, they kill the babies. So bobolinks are having big problems in the Midwest. A bird that's not having a problem is a dick thistle. Dick thistle loves fields that are dominated by thistle. Well, thistle, you're not going to farm thistle. So, you know, they're doing quite well. We tend to see a lot more dick thistles now in Michigan than we did 40 years ago. The birds that got everybody into bird watching probably are warblers. We'll look at a bunch of warblers that are pretty common, both as migrants and maybe nesting. And then we'll go to some that aren't. So redstarts, American redstart, common, fairly abundant bird. You see lots of them in migration. They're nesting in most counties in Michigan. Next to it, you've got black-throated blue, another common migrant, common nesting bird in the UP. It's not abundant, but it's relatively common. If you go out and spend a day walking woodland roads, you'll probably find a couple. Black-throated green, on the other hand, has become quite an abundant nester in Michigan. The bay-breasted warbler, that's in the lower left corner, is a common migrant and a very rare nesting bird. There are very few scattered records in the Upper Peninsula. The black Burnian warbler, which I really think should be the flame-throated warbler, but I think there is one somewhere else, is a fairly common nesting bird. Below it, a Canada warbler, a common nester in boreal bogs, a relatively common migrant. In the upper center, Cape May warbler, which kind of fluctuates in how abundant it is. It's one of the spruce budworm warblers, and in years following a big outbreak of spruce budworm in the north, far north, you end up with a lot of Cape May warblers. These also nest as far south as bogs in the lower peninsula. So you can see a small number of these in summer, even in the lower peninsula. Black and white warbler is relatively common as a migrant everywhere, and as a nesting bird in probably 2/3 of the state. Chestnut-sided warbler in the center, pretty common nesting bird all through Michigan. And the Canada warbler over there, which you can, a boreal bog bird. if you're visiting, people always surprise me that they get really excited about a Canada warbler. I think it's because they don't know the song, but if you know the song, they're a fairly common migrant, and you can find them in boreal bogs. More warblers. Yellowrumped Warbler, I learned originally as a myrtle warbler, and that's what I still call it. No, it has nothing to do with myrtle trees. It's the fact that Audubon shot the first one in a myrtle. So I called it the myrtle warbler. You go to the West Coast, you've got Audubon's warbler, which is essentially this bird with a yellow throat. Below it, palm warbler. Palm warbler is a relatively common nesting bird in Michigan. It nests basically in boreal bogs and the same habitat you find Kirlins warblers. So if you find Kirlins warblers, you should also be looking for them. A warbler that'll come to a feeder is a pine warbler. That's a pine warbler at our feeder at Whitefish Point. So it's kind of neat. They're a fairly common warbler. Below it is a Wilson's warbler, common migrant, rare nesting bird in the Upper Peninsula. It nests in kind of scrubby shrub habitat in wetlands. And then a prairie warbler. Prairie warbler used to nest all through Michigan in the same habitat as Kirlins warbler, but they've disappeared and nobody's quite sure why. So I don't know of any nesting in years. Kind of little skulking birds. So you've got northern water thrush on the left here, which you find in wetlands all through Michigan. So they nest in pretty much every county. And ovenbirds, which probably one of the more abundant nesting birds in Michigan. And then you've got yellowbirds. You've got the yellow warbler on the left. You've got the prothonotary warbler on the right. Yellow warbler nests very commonly through all of the lower peninsula, less so in the upper peninsula. And the prothonotary warbler over there on the right used to be very rare in southern Michigan. If you wanted to see prothonotary warbler, you went over to Berrien County. And now they're nesting along a lot of rivers in southern Michigan, as far north as maybe the Maple River. So to the center is a yellow-throated warbler. Yellow-throated warbler, once again, used to go over to Berrien County to see. They nested in sycamores along the St. Joe's River. Now they're nesting in Washtenaw County. And what I like about this one, I photographed this one at Whitefish Point. It's in a sugar maple. So, weird things. I mentioned something about worm-eating warbler. I photographed this worm-eating warbler at Nichols Arboretum in 1983, 84. And it's one of about 20 that I've seen in the yard. They usually show up in late April, early May. And they usually show up before the chipping sparrows do. And they have a very confusing song. They're a little more insect-like than a chipping sparrow. So they're kind of neat. They do nest in Allegan State Game Area in Allegan County. So looking for Kirlins Warbler. That map, oh wow, that map really is not looking good on the screen, but it shows where the nesting regions are. They really center around Gaylord, Grayling, Mayo. They're nesting now in a number of counties in the Upper Peninsula, a few scattered in Wisconsin, and very small numbers show up in Ontario, and they winter in the Bahamas. Well, when you go out to look for Kirlins Warbler, that's the bird on the far left, you're also going to find Upland Sandpiper. Upland Sandpiper is a sandpiper you rarely find along shores with other sandpipers. And it's not uncommon to find them in the same areas you find Kirlins warblers, as well as finding palm warblers. That palm warbler was one that my wife banded. It was in her study area on Vermilion Road, off of Vermilion Road in the Upper Peninsula. And it's a spot that had up to 8 pairs years ago, but they're no longer nesting there. The trees have gotten too big. But for 3 years, also had a Kirlins warbler show up. Bluebirds, Kirlins warbler country, great spot for bluebirds. It's just, you know, they're everywhere now. And cuckoos, you know, usually when you're in Kirlin warbler country, you end up hearing and seeing a bunch of cuckoos. Another nice thing about Kirlins warbler country is the fact that the understory of the jack pines is dominated by blueberry. I like it when I can go out and look at plants and identify plants and eat them. And we are lucky in the eastern UP to have a tremendous number of blueberry. There are several species so that the season goes on for about 2 months. And, you know, if you know where to go, they're easy to find. And if you don't know where to go, people won't tell you. So the plant on the right, the flower on the right, is just a favorite flower of mine, bog bean. And it's a wetland plant. I'm also a big fan of carnivorous plants. And these are 3 species of sundew. Michigan has 4. I've only seen 3 of them. In the lower left, you have the roundleaf sundew, which is the common species. In Washtenaw County, you can go out to the bog at the Eddy Discovery Center, and they're quite common in the bog. Above it is the great sundew, also called the English sundew, and I only know one spot for that, and that's at Vermilion Point in the Upper Peninsula. And the other sundew is the spatulate leaf sundew, and we usually see that at Bishop's Bog south of Kalamazoo, which is kind of a neat spot. If you've never been to Bishop's Bog, early August is just about the prime time to go. When we're out looking at plants, we love to look at ferns. There's a common one here, an uncommon one, and a rare one. Common one's in the center, maidenhair fern. That's a common fern. The less common one on the lower right is the walking fern. You go, wait a minute, how can a fern walk? Well, the reproductive part on that fern is at the tip of the fern. And so when it bends over, a new plant starts from the tip and then grows, and it spreads like it's walking across a rock. Because you usually find them growing on or near rocks. And on the left is a Botrychium. It's one of the moonworts. That's a Michigan moonwort. And they're very small. Herb Wagner taught me about moonworts. He told me, Mike, those are butt warts. And I'm going, okay, you got to get on your butt in order to see them. And so it was neat. That plant probably maxes out at about 2 inches tall. I was literally face to face with that one. So yesterday we went to Nan Weston because we like to go there in January and February because it's the only place you can start the year seeing an orchid. Usually what you see is the putty root leaf, and that's on the left. Those leaves are persistent all winter, and they photosynthesize. And then the flowers, which are really not very impressive, come up in the middle of the summer. We really scour Michigan for orchids. We go out of our way. And we like these too. And the leaves, once again, are more impressive than the flowers. On the lower right is Menzies rattlesnake plantain. It's one of the orchids that actually grows on our property at Whitefish Point. Above it is the dwarf rattlesnake plantain, which is even smaller. And on the lower left is the downy rattlesnake plantain. And they're all pretty nice plants. These are two orchids that you can find at the Eddy Discovery Center, which is on the western side of Washtenaw County. Arethusa is the bright pink one on the left, and the grass pink on the right. We find grass pink at a lot of spots. A common orchid, a rare orchid. The common orchid is the yellow lady slipper on the right. Once again, you go to Eddy, you go to a lot of places, you'll find yellow lady slippers all through the state. The Calypso orchid on the left is fairly rare. I love its common name, the fairy slipper. And it is a neat little orchid. It's probably, 3 or 4 inches tall. And you can just find them at very few spots that I am not allowed to even talk about. But if you come with us, we can show them to you. The fringed orchids. The prairie fringed orchid, prairie fringed white orchid or white prairie fringed orchid on the left is from the Eddy Discovery Center. Oh, gee whiz. You got a reason to go to Eddy. There are lots of orchids. The one in the middle is a purple fringed orchid. We see those at Naomi Kong in the Upper Peninsula, as well as other spots in the UP. The real stunner in this is the orange fringed orchid, and we only know of one spot, and that's the Bishop's Bog south of Kalamazoo, and these flower in early August. So I have kept track over the years exactly when they're flowering and how many flowers and all that stuff. And one last orchid, the pink lady slipper. Photographed that on our property at Whitefish Point. But when you're looking for orchids, you often bump into other things unexpectedly, like maybe a grouse. The rough grouse is pretty common from the middle part of the state north. It used to be common in Washtenaw County, but I can't remember the last time somebody told me about a rough grouse down there. But there are 2 other grouse that people want to see. Sharptail, which are easy to see in the winter and around the Sioux and Rudyard in that eastern UP. We see them also, believe it or not, in migration at Whitefish Point. They fly by. And you want to know something that's weird? Is to watch a sharp-tailed grouse fly in and plop down at the top of a 40-foot pine tree. It just doesn't look right. And spruce grouse. Everyone wants a spruce grouse. And then go, oh, how do I find a spruce grouse? Well, in the winter and spring, you have to cruise sandy roads starting before sun is really up. And you'll find them off the sides of the roads, picking up gravel, gritting. But we end up seeing more of them actually in the summer when somebody's out and just surprises one along a small trail or bushwhacking through jackpine. Michigan gets a lot of waterfowl. You got 3 common ducks here and a loon. Common loon is indeed common. You can see large numbers in migration. Most lakes in the middle and north part of the state will have loons on them in the summer. And blue-winged teal in the upper right, upper left, pintail in the lower left, and shovelers in the lower right, all fairly common. Not so common is ruddy duck, the lower left. Ruddy duck is just not as common as they used to be. You know, we see a few in migration here and there, and that's it. Redneck grebes, they're where you find them. You know, almost every year, Barton Pond in Ann Arbor will have a redneck grebe in the spring for a few days. You want to see redneck grebes? I photographed these at Whitefish Point. They come through literally by the tens of thousands. And if you're there early in the morning or in the evening, they'll be sitting on the water instead of flying by. And since we have a cabin that's about 400 feet off the bay, it's really fun to listen to them calling at night because they really have a neat call. Now the bird on the right didn't belong here. I think that's the Michigan record gargany. It's a European species or a Eurasian species. It occurred at Whitefish Point. At the same time, there was an olivaceous cormorant. And I missed literally by my camera shutter wouldn't go, of getting a picture of the gargany swimming past the olivaceous cormorant sitting in the tree. Olivaceous cormorant is from the south. It's a southern bird. So yeah, sometimes you just got to get lucky. Piping plover, they're rare as migrants anywhere. We're lucky at Whitefish Point to have most years 2 or 3 nesting pairs right at the point. The bird on the left is a hatchier bird. It only has one color band. The bird on the right is an adult. It's got multiple color bands. So they get banded as a hatchier bird. They get one color. That color is used for that year and that site. And then they get 2 other color bands the next year. Other shorebirds that are kind of fun. One is whimbrel on the left, which is rare most of the time, except for about 2 weeks in the spring. And that's in late May, the last week of May into the first week of June, when they go by the thousands. And golden plovers. The American golden plover is not a common migrant. And you can see from the golden on the feathers where it gets its name. But now I was talking earlier about the Muskegon water treatment plant. Well, on the right is a male ruff. That was photographed at the Muskegon water treatment plant. On the left is a reeve, a female ruff. I photographed at Whitefish Point. So you get weird shorebirds showing up all over the place. Okay, 2 birds at the same suet feeder. Which one's the hairy and which one's the downy? Oh, gee whiz. The downy is smaller than the height of the feeder. The hairy is the same size. Now, people go, well, it's the hairy and downy woodpecker, so what? I don't think people have realized how uncommon hairy woodpeckers have become. They used to be quite common. Downies are still quite common. Hairy woodpeckers, much less so. And I think if you keep track of those things, you start to see these declines. Mrs. and Mr. Pileated Woodpecker. They're in the same tree at different times. The female's on the left, the male's on the right. I don't know. Once again, when it comes to woodpeckers, this is a hard bird to beat. I can remember the first pileated woodpecker I saw in Washington County was probably 1977. By 1980, there were only 3 or 4 records for the county. Now they nest in the county. This is another bird that has expanded back into Washtenaw County as the result of the trees and the woodlots getting bigger. 2 different birds. On the right, yellow-bellied sapsucker. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers are kind of interesting because they have a very, very noticeable tapping rhythm. It's like a telegraph. It's like tick, 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 tick. It's very staccato. The 2 birds on the left are blackback woodpeckers.
There's a male black-backed woodpecker in a tree, and there's another black-backed woodpecker feeding young at the nest. They're not rare in the Upper Peninsula, but they are quite uncommon. And you go to Pashiki grade, they nest there. You know, people always hear, well, you got to go to a burn to find them. No, you don't. Going to a burn makes it easier to find them. And I think over about 3 or 4 years, we found 4 or 5 nests. Most of them in a big burn area. I don't know. This is a hard woodpecker to top. Red-headed woodpecker. Red-headed woodpecker is just one of my favorites. And it took me a long time to get that picture of the red-headed woodpecker where I was looking down on it. It was flying back and forth to our feeder at Whitefish Point. And I was up on our deck. And I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the spot between the feeder and the tree it's coming to. And I just kept shooting photos as it flew by, and got some nice ones. Well, while you're out and about, there are also mammals. The coyote there is one of the family group behind our house in Ann Arbor. They'll just come out sometimes and, well, sit in the sand. And I think it was in the fall, whenever it was at about noon or 1 o'clock, in the afternoon, they would start howling. Or if a siren went by, they'd start howling. So the chipmunk, on the other hand, is not an eastern chipmunk. It's a rare chipmunk. It's a least chipmunk. These occur in the Upper Peninsula. They were common 40 years ago. They've been fairly uncommon since. Their decline was kind of happening at the same time as the pine martens were increasing. I think they're a common prey item. Right there, that one is helping spread a dandelion. That's what it's eating. Michigan has bats, but typically the only bat you'll see easily during the day are red bats. On the left there is a red bat. I've photographed 3 or 4 over the years, perched in trees. And porcupines. I don't know. I think my wife and I both like porcupines a lot. And so we find them most years. Snowshoe hare, which is the big hare, rabbit, that occurs in the Upper Peninsula. This is a spring one that's lost most of its white. In the winter, they are white, and in the summer, they lose most of the white and they turn brown. On the right is a flying squirrel. We get them coming to our feeders. You know, we call them bird feeders, but other animals use them as well. And so I very slowly open their sliding door to get this picture. And it's pretty neat. So other animals use our feeders, like this black bear. Yep, those are our feeders on the ground. It came, it's eating, it was just sitting there emptying the feeder out, and it didn't do any damage. And I wanted a better picture of it. It was looking away from me. I yelled at it, and finally I went and opened the slider and I walked outside and I said, hey, look over here. And it looked up at me and I walked around the back and I realized, oh, wait a minute, it's 14 feet away. And I went back in the house. It went around the house, got in the driveway and said, you know what? I wasn't done. And it came back to the feeders and it just kept eating. So you should go out, look at the things that are around, whether they're rare or common. You have the opportunity to see something that's rare, the habitat's going, do it, because it could be gone. This is a photo I took 28th of April, 1978. The last time greater prairie chickens danced in Michigan. There it is. There's one of them. There were 4 that day. The next year, they were gone. This is in Saukey County. Oh, I forgot the name of the spot. But there was a blind there, and you sign up and go to the blind. You get there. You have to get there at 4 o'clock in the morning or earlier. Wait. You couldn't leave till they were done. And once again, this I shot on black and white film, and I once again forced the film to do things it didn't want to do. But yeah, so that's it. And a lot of different ways you can get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook, Michael Kielb. I've got an email address, makelb@comcast.net, an iNaturalist, where both Susan and I post a lot of our nature sightings. And I have my own blog where I write a lot about natural history, but I write about whatever I want to in the course of a day. The other day I wrote about Valentine's Day. So anyway, it's michaelsplace.com. No apostrophe S, no capital letters. So that's it. And if there are questions, I would be happy to answer them. How are we doing on Zoom for questions? Okay. Yeah, it's just fun. Of what's? Harriers. Males are much less, they're much wearier than females. Females don't care. When you talk to hawk banders and you look at hawk banding, I looked at a lot of hawk banding data from the past. Females are banded 15, 20 to 1 more than males. And females will come in for bait because they have a higher calorie need than the males do. Male goes, nope, I'm not chancing that one. I'll go find a mouse. So, and interestingly, the same thing happened with crows. We had a friend who was a graduate student at U of M banding crows. Females were easier to trap than males because females said, there's food. Males go, no, I'll wait. And same thing happened. A lot of her banding returns came from crow hunters, overwhelmingly more females than males. So yeah. So I don't know if the Zoom people heard the question, but why do you? Oh, thank you. Yeah, but I love male harriers. And you know the other thing is in migration, tend to see a lot more male harriers right as sun is rising, and then the evening as the sun is going down. I don't think that they migrate as much in the middle of the day, where you'll see females and young ones all day. Yeah. So. All right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So once you go to the Eddy Discovery Center for orchids, late May through, yeah, and they each have a different season. So, you know, like the white fringed the prairie white fringed orchid, there's a very small window of time, and offhand, I don't remember exactly when that is. The grass pink is a little more widespread. There are 3 lady slippers that occur there. The white, white, yellow, pink, and what's the one we see in Moran? Showy. The showy lady slipper. They all occur there as well. And you kind of have to go at an appropriate time. And just off the top of my head, I don't remember for each of them when that is. No, Nan Weston is at Sharon Hollow. The entrance is on Yasudi's Road, and it's they're actually quite far apart. Yeah, yeah, and but I think one of the best times to go there is late April, early May, when all the spring ephemerals are up. There's lots of different violets and just neat little plants. You can go there in the course of a day and see, 30, 40 different wildflowers. And yeah. So, and then later in season there, usually at some point in May, they have another orchid that blooms, the showy orchis, which is, not an abundant one. All right, neat. Yes. Yeah, I think females tend to be on the move a lot more than the males, because they're just looking for stuff to eat. In raptors, the females are bigger than the males, and as a result, they have a higher caloric demand. They need to take in more calories, and then also when they're migrating, females are probably starting to ovulate as well, so they have an even higher calorie need, and so that's the point. That's what they do. Male harriers are just wary birds. It's so hard to get a good photo of a male harrier. They just, you'll sit there and you raise your camera and they veer off. Female will just fly right over you. All right, good, great. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Good, see ya. Yep.